My brother slapped my 3-year-old daughter and broke her nose at Christmas dinner, then said I was overreacting. Everyone just sat there, but then my military commander wife stood up, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Get out." He never came back. Crack. The sound of my baby girl's nose breaking will haunt me forever. One moment, 3-year-old Emma was giggling as she played with her new Christmas doll near the dining room table. The next, she was on the floor, blood streaming down her tiny face, wailing in a way that made my heart shatter into a million pieces. My brother Derek stood over her, his hands still raised, face twisted with rage. That little brat knocked over my drink all over my new shirt. The entire room fell silent except for Emma's heartbreaking sobs. 23 people, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and their children, all frozen like mannequins around our beautifully set Christmas table. The smell of turkey and stuffing still hung in the air, but the warmth of the holiday had instantly transformed into something cold and terrible. "Derek," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside Emma. My hands shook as I gathered her into my arms, her tears mixing with the blood. "Oh sweetheart, Mommy's here." "She's fine," Derek scoffed, straightening his collar. "Kids need to learn respect." "You're overreacting, Sarah." "Overreacting." The word echoed in my head as I looked around the room, desperately searching for support. My father avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Aunt Linda whispered something to her husband, who just shrugged. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended my daughter. 23 adults, and they all just sat there while my 3-year-old bled from her broken nose because she accidentally bumped into a grown man's drink. That's when I heard it, the soft click of a chair being pushed back. My wife Commander Jessica Hayes rose slowly from her seat at the far end of the table. At 34, Jess stood 5'8" with shoulders that could carry the weight of the world, which, as a military commander overseeing logistics for 3,000 personnel, she basically did. Her dark hair was pulled back in her usual neat bun, and she wore the emerald green sweater I'd bought her last Christmas, the one that brought out her eyes. But those eyes weren't warm now. They were ice cold and laser focused on Derek. Thud. 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 Her footsteps were measured and deliberate as she walked around the table, her military bearing evident in every movement. The room somehow became even quieter, if that was possible. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floor. Derek, apparently oblivious to the danger approaching, was still brushing at his shirt. "I can't believe nobody taught that kid basic manners. In my day. Get out." Jess's voice was quiet, but it carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. She stood directly in front of Derek now, maybe 2 feet away, her hands relaxed at her sides but her posture screaming controlled fury. Derek laughed, actually laughed. "Excuse me? This isn't your house, lady. Sarah's my sister, and this is my family dinner. Get out." This time, there was no mistaking the steel in her voice. I'd heard Jess use that tone exactly twice before, once when dealing with a subordinate who'd been harassing female soldiers, and once when a contractor tried to shortchange military families on housing repairs. Both times, the problem had been resolved immediately. Derek's smirk faltered. "Look, I don't know who you think you are. I'm Commander Jessica Hayes, United States Army." Her voice remained deadly calm. "I've spent 12 years learning how to handle people who hurt children. Right now, I'm giving you one chance to walk away with your dignity intact." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even Emma had stopped crying, sensing the shift in atmosphere. She pressed closer to me, her little hand gripping my sweater. Derek puffed out his chest, trying to regain his bravado. "You can't order me around. This is America, not some military base." Crack. The sound of Jess's knuckles popping as she flexed her fingers made several people flinch. My cousin Dave actually pushed his chair back from the table. "You're right," Jess said, taking one step closer to Derek. "This isn't a military base. Which means I don't have to follow rules of engagement." Derek's face went pale. For the first time, he seemed to realize he might have made a serious miscalculation. "Jess," my mother finally found her voice, "let's all just calm down. Mrs. Peterson." Jess didn't take her eyes off Derek. "With respect, your son just struck a 3-year-old child hard enough to break her nose. In my world, we call that assault on a minor. The only reason I'm not calling the police right now is because I'm giving him 30 seconds to remove himself from this house." 25 seconds, she continued, her voice like a countdown to doomsday. Derek looked around the room, finally seeming to understand that nobody was going to back him up. Dad was studying his napkin like it contained the secrets of the universe. Mom had tears in her eyes but kept her mouth shut. Uncle Marcus was nodding slightly, apparently agreeing with Jess. 20 seconds. "This is ridiculous," Derek muttered, but he was already backing toward the hallway. "Sarah, you're really going to let your wife threaten me?" I stood up carefully, Emma still in my arms, and for the first time since the slap, I found my voice. "Derek, you broke my daughter's nose because she bumped your drink. A 3-year-old. My 3-year-old. 15 seconds. Jess hadn't moved, but somehow her presence seemed to fill the entire room. Fine. Derek threw his hands up. I'm leaving. But don't expect me to come crawling back. 10 seconds. Derek grabbed his coat from the hall closet with shaking hands. 5 seconds. The front door slammed shut with such force that the Christmas wreath fell off and landed with a soft thump on the porch. Silence. Jess let out a slow breath and turned to face the table full of stunned relatives. I'm going to take Emma to the emergency room to have her nose looked at. When we get back, I expect someone to explain to me why 23 adults watched a grown man assault a toddler and said nothing. She walked over to us, her expression immediately softening as she looked at Emma. Hey there, little butterfly, she said gently, using her special nickname for our daughter. Want to go for a car ride? We'll get you all fixed up. Emma nodded against my shoulder, still sniffling. Jess helped us with our coats, her movements tender and careful, such a contrast to the controlled fury she displayed moments before. As we headed to the door, I heard Uncle Marcus clear his throat. Jess is right, he said quietly. We should have said something. Derek's always had a temper, Aunt Linda whispered. But I never thought he'd hit a baby, finished Cousin Dave. That was messed up. Mom started crying softly. I should have protected Emma. I should have said something. Jess paused at the door and turned back one more time. You still can, she said simply. It's never too late to do the right thing. Click. The door closed behind us, leaving the family to contemplate their silence. The emergency room visit was a blur of paperwork, x-rays, and a pediatrician with kind eyes who confirmed that Emma's nose was indeed broken but would heal properly with time. She gave us pain medication for our brave little girl and scheduled a follow-up appointment. Emma fell asleep in her car seat on the drive home, exhausted from the trauma and medication. Jess reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked softly. I wasn't, really. The image of Derek's hand connecting with Emma's face kept replaying in my mind. But more than that, I kept thinking about the silence. 23 people who claimed to love us, and not one had stood up for a 3-year-old child. I keep thinking about what you said, I told her. About it never being too late to do the right thing. Do you think they will? Do the right thing, I mean? I honestly didn't know. My family had always been conflict avoidant, preferring to sweep problems under the rug rather than address them head on. Derek had always been the golden child, star athlete in high school, successful businessman, mom and dad's pride and joy. Even when he'd shown signs of having a nasty temper over the years, everyone just made excuses. He's under a lot of stress at work. He doesn't mean it. That's just how Derek is. But hitting a 3-year-old? There was no excuse for that. And the fact that everyone just sat there. When we got home, the house was empty except for a note from my mother. Took some leftovers home. We'll call tomorrow. Love you all. I tucked Emma into bed, her little nose taped and bandaged, and sat with her until she fell asleep. Jess was in the kitchen, cleaning up the abandoned Christmas dinner. Turkey and stuffing sat untouched on plates around our dining room table, a stark reminder of how quickly everything had gone wrong. Leave it, I told her, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. We can deal with it tomorrow. She turned in my arms, and I saw that her hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline finally wearing off. I wanted to do more than just tell him to leave, she admitted quietly. When I saw Emma on the floor like that. But you didn't. You handled it perfectly. She shook her head. I should have acted sooner. The moment I saw him raise his hand. Hey. I cupped her face in my hands. You can't save everyone from everything. But you saved Emma from anything worse, and you made it clear that behavior won't be tolerated. That matters. We held each other in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect Christmas, and I felt grateful beyond words for my wife's strength and courage. The phone started ringing around 10 that night. First it was my mother, calling to check on Emma and to apologize. I should have said something, she cried into the phone. I was just so shocked, and Derek has never. I mean, he's gotten angry before, but never with a child. Then Uncle Marcus called. He'd apparently spent the drive home lecturing his own kids about standing up for what's right and wanted to make sure we knew he supported Jess's actions completely. Cousin Dave texted, Jess is a badass. Derek had it coming. But the most surprising call came from my father around 11 p.m. Sarah, his voice was gruff, the way it got when he was trying not to cry. I failed you today. I failed Emma. I've been thinking about it all evening, and there's no excuse for what Derek did or for my silence. Dad. No, let me finish. Your wife showed more courage and integrity in 5 minutes than I've shown in years of letting Derek's behavior slide. I'm proud of Jess, and I'm ashamed of myself. I started crying then, relief flooding through me. I'd been so afraid that Derek's actions would split our family apart, but instead, they seemed to be bringing clarity to long-ignored problems. What happens now? I asked. Now we do better, Dad said firmly. Derek can come back to family functions when he's ready to apologize to Emma and prove he's gotten help for his anger issues. Not before. Over the next few weeks, the story of what happened at Christmas dinner spread through our extended family network. The reactions were mixed but largely supportive. A few relatives tried to make excuses for Derek, he was probably just tired. Kids can be annoying. Maybe he didn't hit her that hard, but they were quickly shut down by others who'd witnessed the incident. Derek himself went radio silent. He didn't call to check on Emma or apologize. He didn't respond to messages from other family members. He just disappeared from our lives like he'd never existed. 3 months later, we heard through the family grapevine that he'd started therapy. Apparently, his girlfriend had threatened to leave him after hearing about the Christmas incident, and that had been the wake-up call he needed. Too little, too late, Jess said when Mom shared the news during one of our weekly dinners. Emma was playing with blocks on the living room floor, her nose completely healed but for a tiny scar that the doctor said would fade with time. Maybe, I said. But people can change. Jess raised an eyebrow. You thinking about letting him back? I don't know. Maybe someday. If he really changes and makes amends. And if Emma's okay with it, Jess added. She gets a vote in this too. That night, as we were putting Emma to bed, she asked about her Uncle Derek for the first time since Christmas. Where did Uncle Derek go? She asked, her 3-year-old brain finally processing the permanent absence of someone who used to be a regular fixture at family gatherings. Jess and I exchanged glances. We'd discussed how to handle this question when it inevitably came up. Uncle Derek made a bad choice and hurt you, I explained gently. So he can't come to family dinners anymore until he learns how to be safe around children. Emma considered this with the serious expression she got when working through complex ideas. Like when I hit Tommy at daycare and had to sit in timeout? Sort of like that, Jess said. But Uncle Derek's timeout is much longer because adults should know better than to hurt children. Will he say sorry? Emma asked. I don't know, sweetheart. Would you want him to? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Mama Jess made him leave because he hurt me? That's right. Good, Emma said with finality. Mama Jess keeps me safe. Thump thump. My heart swelled with pride and love as I tucked our daughter in for the night. 6 months later, Derek finally reached out. Not to me or Jess, but to Emma, through a letter addressed to Miss Emma Hayes Peterson. Inside was a drawing of a little girl with curly hair, Emma's hair, holding hands with stick figures labeled Mommy and Mama Jess. At the bottom, in Derek's surprisingly neat handwriting, was a simple message. Dear Emma, I'm very sorry I hurt you. I was wrong, and I'm learning how to be a better person. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Love, Uncle Derek. Jess read the letter first, then showed it to me. What do you think? I think it's a start, I said honestly. But actions matter more than words. Agreed. And it's ultimately Emma's choice whether she wants him back in her life. When we showed Emma the letter and drawing, she studied them carefully, then went to her toy box and pulled out a piece of paper and crayons. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of her coloring filled the quiet living room. When she was finished, she handed us her creation, a picture of 3 stick figures, clearly meant to be us, standing in front of a house with a big X over a 4th figure standing far away. Uncle Derek has to stay away until he's not scary anymore, she announced. Then maybe he can visit, but Mama Jess has to be there too. Smart kid. 2 years have passed since that Christmas dinner. Derek has continued therapy and has sent birthday and Christmas cards to Emma each year. He's never pushed for contact or tried to guilt trip us into forgiveness. He started volunteering at a local youth center, according to family updates, and has apparently made real progress on his anger management. But he's never asked to come back to family functions. Never asked to see Emma. He seems to understand that he lost the right to be part of our lives the moment he chose violence against a child. Emma, now 5 and fierce, occasionally mentions him when she sees family photos from before the incident. She's never expressed any desire to see him, though she stopped drawing X's over his pictures, which I take as a positive sign in her own healing process. Jess was promoted last year and now commands an even larger base. She still gets that same steely look in her eyes whenever someone mentions child abuse or domestic violence, and I've heard through military spouse networks that she's become something of a legend for her zero-tolerance approach to protecting families. As for our extended family, the incident became a turning point. Uncle Marcus started volunteering with a local organization that helps children in foster care. My parents began attending therapy to work through their patterns of enabling Derek's behavior over the years. Even quiet cousin Dave found his voice and has become an advocate for standing up to bullies. The Christmas dinner that was supposed to bring us all together instead taught us valuable lessons about courage, consequences, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. In the end, losing Derek from our lives wasn't a loss at all. It was the removal of a toxic element that had been poisoning our family dynamic for years. Last Christmas, Emma helped me set the table for our annual dinner. As she carefully placed napkins at each setting, she paused at the spot where Derek used to sit. Is Uncle Derek still in timeout? She asked. Yes, sweetheart. He's still learning how to be safe around children. She nodded solemnly and continued setting the table, skipping that spot entirely. Clink, clink, clink. The sound of silverware being arranged just right. Mama, Emma said suddenly, when I grow up, I want to be strong like Mama Jess. You already are, I told her, watching my brave little girl prepare to welcome the family members who had chosen to stand by us. You already are. That night, surrounded by relatives who had learned to speak up, protect each other, and do the right thing even when it's hard, I realized that sometimes the best Christmas gift isn't what you gain, it's what you're finally brave enough to let go of. And,